Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Once again, please put your hands together and welcome to the stage, Anthony Cio.
Good morning, everyone. You all look wonderful today. We have another great day planned for you today. As we begin to try to pull together all the elements that we're hearing. How do we make this start to work within us? We'll have lots of workshops today, more information. Please keep in your mind, through everything that you're seeing and hearing, remember the importance of story. Remember the importance of the 4 tenets of missionary discipleship: encounter, accompany, community, and send. And please also remember that you are empowered to become missionary disciples and to set the world on fire. Will you remember that? Thank you. This morning, it's my pleasure to introduce Carolyn Woo, a distinguished President's Fellow for Global Development at Purdue University. Prior to her appointment at Purdue, she served as President and CEO of Catholic Relief Services, the official international humanitarian agency of the Catholic community in the United States. As President of CRS, she was featured in the May and June 2013 issue of Foreign Policy as one of the 500 most powerful people on the planet. Wow, I was right. During her time leading CRS, Purdue and CRS established a strategic partnership. She currently serves on 3 corporate and 6 Catholic organizational boards. Her presentation this morning is entitled Rise and Shine, and it focuses on how parishes play a part to make God real, act as both messenger and message, constitute his body on earth, and pass on our faith to the next generation. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Carolyn Woo. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. With that music, I feel like a rock star. Probably the only time in my life that I would feel like a rock star. Every morning I start with a prayer, and when I do talks, I also start with the same prayer. And it goes, "O Lord, open my lips and let my mouth proclaim your praise." So whatever I do is really, hopefully, what the Lord wants. Before I go into my talk, Deacon Anthony said a little bit about the foreign policy acknowledgement that I was one of the 500 most powerful people on the planet. And that is really not about me. At that point, it was only my 2nd year at Catholic Relief Services. So that honor really did not go to me, but it went to Catholic Relief Services. And I want to say this is because CRS works in the name of the U.S. Catholics. CRS works in all of your name, and you support it in different ways, including the Rice Bowl. And for 75 years, since World War II, when the Bishops' Conference started the organization to work with refugees all over Europe and around the world, it has continued to do the work of the U.S. Catholic Church in terms of missionary discipleship. It goes to over 100 countries, and they are the most sort of vulnerable and poor countries. They are not places where you would go on vacation. In the Middle East, in Syria, in Iraq, they've been in Sudan. In Latin America, is probably in every continent. And it goes out to the poorest and the most vulnerable And as I say, over 100 countries serving 100 million people a year in your name. So I just want you to know. So it was also cited as, of those 500, the only 50, which is a force for good. So I don't know what the other 450 stands for, but I'm glad that the work of the church is a force for good. So thank you for the invitation from Bishop Sullivan and all your staff. I just want to say I looked at your program and before then some of the description. You have been talking a lot about missionary discipleship. I look at the program. There are your Easter plans, so you come very prepared over a year of hard work. You have given a lot of thought about what is missionary discipleship, what are you called to do, and also what you will do. And I think later on in the workshops, you will hear a lot about the hows. So I'm going to take this morning to take a chance to step back. More, who are the we who are called to missionary discipleship? And why are we called? And before I go there, I just have a little story I want to share. I have a nephew who is almost 40 years old now. My brother married a Canadian. My brother is Chinese. His wife is Caucasian. And this is the first child born into the family. So we were very eager to show my nephew, whose name is Matthew, what does it mean to be of both cultures. So, he knows the Canadian culture. He went to a Canadian kindergarten. He knew daily life as a Canadian Caucasian. So we took him to Chinatown as one of our activities, and we pointed to him everything Chinese, all right? So in front of a Chinese restaurant, there would be these lions, and there would be these red pillars, and we say Chinese, and we would go and have Chinese food, which is dim sum, and we would go to the Chinese market and point out the different things which are Chinese. So that night he went home, and his Canadian grandmother asked him, Matthew, what did you do today? He said, well, the aunts and uncle took me to Chinatown. And his grandmother asked, what did you learn? And he said, yes, I learned that I'm half Chinese and half human. All right, so when we focus on a topic, it's easy to go away after several days of really energetic, exciting, but deep focus on missionary discipleship. I hope you don't go away and say, well, I am part missionary disciple and part accountant or part whatever that you are doing today. I think Cardinal Tobin, in kind of like a little throwaway line yesterday, said, one of the problems is that we don't integrate faith with our life. So I hope that when you go away from this, you're all missionary, disciple, and all whatever that you are. So stepping back, by the way, I love this. Oh, I have a photo, not a photo, a painting. Let's just put that up. As the people of God. I love this picture. It's painted by Brother Cletus, who has since passed away. He was from Tucson, I believe. And he just had these ways of painting, and I think that just represented us well as the people of God. So I want to just step back for a little bit. I chose the title, Rise and Shine. It came from Isaiah chapter 60. Where he began with that. But before I quote from that particular psalm, let's just go back to Isaiah's time. It was about 6th century BC. The Jewish people were occupied by the Babylonians. They were, in essence, slaves and did all the things that slaves were required to do, a lot of the heavy building and serving the Babylonians as servants. They were not allowed to really practice their faith. Their faith was ridiculed. And most of the time, they were born into slavery and they know they would die in slavery and that their children would have the same fate. So it was a very dark time for the Israelites. But out of the blue, this is Isaiah Psalm 60, the first 3 verses. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness is over the peoples. But the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn. And I think what is interesting about this psalm is that the light of the Lord became the light of the people. This oppressed people suddenly were crowned by the light and the glory of God. And from the lowest of nations, they were to draw all other nations and the kings of those other nations. Think about this. What do they have to draw anyone except the light and the glory of God, which actually almost spotlighted them? Rise is a very active verb. It calls us to move, to not be lethargic. Now, I think tomorrow in one of your Psalms, the City of God, it says, awake from your slumber. Okay? So rise is to get up, but it doesn't stop there. The implications of rise is that they are going somewhere. And they're going somewhere which is filled with hope, a destination that they're very excited about. It's an invitation to break away from that hopelessness and from that lethargy. A broken people will be healed, they would be crowned, and they would be light. Rise is not just a physical activity. It requires the brain to go along. It is an invitation for a different imagination. That destiny is probably not seen except in the mind's eyes of what they could be. It's an invitation to imagine a future with the Lord in it. It's a reminder, what is that future where God is a part of it? I like this a lot. It caught my attention. You know how you read things over and over again, scriptures? And the beauty of scriptures is that as you stay with it, it actually allows for new insights. This particular psalm is the first reading for the feast of the Epiphany. Remember the Epiphany, when there was the light, the star of Bethlehem? The star had that light that guided the Magi to see Jesus. Epiphany is the manifestation that God is here, that God is on this earth. But that's what we think, and we sing, "We three kings of Orient are." The only thing that ever touched on the Orient, I thought that was written for me. But to think of that light, the star of Bethlehem, God's light that led the wise men to Jesus. The first reading reminds us that it's not just a celestial light. God's light became the light of his people. And this light of his people, therefore, will draw other people to them, because this is God's light and God's glory. So I think in everything that we do is to remember the light that guided people to Jesus, where he became real on this earth, is also the light that shines on us and shines through us. And in the same way that the light gave direction to the three wise men. The light that we have from God is also to provide illumination for other people. We are the light of the world. So that's the first point, and by the way, I have about 5 points. Today we are reminded that we are not only just the people of God, we are a part of God. From the people of God to being a part of God, because we are the body of Christ. We're not just his people. He makes us a part of him. Now, recently, I was in an interview with a gentleman who came from a Norwegian oil company. So this is not at all a religious context. I don't even know whether the person has a faith. So we were talking about what companies like an oil company can do for the good of the world. And somehow we got on the topic of hope. And he said, "Do you have hope? And if so, why?" Oh, I said, well, yeah, there are a lot of problems in the world, and I work a lot in the whole area of climate. Yeah, I said, a lot of problems, but I said, I have hope. And he said, why? I said, because I'm a Catholic. And after I said that, I found myself like totally inarticulate. What type of an answer? You know, is that in any way understandable to anyone? It almost sounded like I belonged to a club, and it's like the Club of Hope, you know, and this is our party line. So I said, that isn't very clear to you, isn't it? I mean, I just came out, I said, yeah, I have hope, I'm a Catholic. So I've been thinking, how would I explain it to this man? I don't have to explain it to you folks because you know. But what does this mean? And because we're having coffee and it is not a session where somebody invited me to give a long explanation, I said, well, what I mean is that God is very real to me. God is real to me. And because God is real, we can never give up hope, right? I mean, that's what our faith is. If God is not real, if it all depends on us, well, that's pretty bad news to some degree. So our teachings tell us that God is present in 3 ways. He walked the earth. He is present in the Eucharist, and he's present in us as the body of Christ. What hit me about all of this is how concrete God makes himself. I think Pope Francis talks a lot about that too. So a lot of times in our prayers, you know, we focus on our mind and we're trying to talk to God up there for whatever we're talking about. But God is not just a spirit. God took a lot of trouble to make himself as concrete as possible. So I just came back from an incredible Holy Land pilgrimage. I've done several of these trips to the Holy Land. This one was just the best. God made himself present very concretely. He was born at a particular point in time, and that is the reign of King Herod. And we actually went to some of the projects that King Herod built. Caesarea Maritima, Caesarea Philippi, and of course, the big fortress in that mountain. But in King Herod's time, in a particular place called Bethlehem, to particular parents called Mary and Joseph, in a particular little town of several hundred called Nazareth. And in prior trips, I've also gone to a place called Sephora, which is about 6 kilometers away from Nazareth, where they think that Jesus and Joseph actually worked. It's a Roman development. In the Church of Annunciation in Nazareth, in the altar in front of the cave where they think Mary encountered the angels. And by the way, a lot of times in those days, people also lived in caves. And in the altar, inscribed in Latin, it says, "Word made flesh here You stand in front of it, you get the chills. Word made flesh here, and in front of the people who are taking their pictures and so on and so forth. It's just for a moment and say how real that it is, the concreteness of Jesus. He had a face, he had a history, he had a lot of the same things that we have. And then, of course, the Eucharist. And I think the priest yesterday said, this is the best banquet this side of heaven, right? Where Jesus gives us himself and invites us to be part of him and him to be part of us. And by the way, it's not just take and eat. People have said the translation is chew and drink, not just eat, but just really a physical activity of engaging the body of Christ. On this pilgrimage, I also found out, our tour guide said, in the discourse where Jesus said, you have to eat my body, you have to drink my blood, otherwise you cannot follow me. And all the people left. All the people left. And he said, why did all the people left? The only people who didn't leave were his apostles. When he asked them, do you want to leave too? And when Peter said, where would we go? To whom would we go? But coming back, he said, why did everybody leave? Because nowadays, we just take that for granted, right? Eat my body, drink my blood. And he says, because in the Jewish customs, they don't eat meat with blood in it. Blood is not something that is part of their diet. So they were just actually scandalized, offended. And why did Jesus say something like that? Knowing that is how the people would respond, that they just absolutely were freaked out by this whole idea that they have to eat him, right? But never mind. In the Eucharist, the best banquet this side of heaven is how Jesus is also present. But what I focus on is that God is also present in us. He made it very clear when he asked Saul, 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 why do you persecute me? Well, Saul didn't went after Jesus, they never really met, but Saul went after the people, the believers, the apostles and the disciples. And so Jesus located himself in those people whom Saul was persecuting. But also, of course, the very famous chapter, Matthew 25, where he said, when you feed the hungry, you have fed me. When you rejected them, you have rejected me. I am in those people. So when you serve God, serve these people, you serve God. When you deny those people, when you refuse to see them, you deny me. So, I think somebody yesterday also said Teresa of Avila's favorite line, Christ has no body but yours, no arms but yours, no feet but yours, and so on, which is true. I often pray for assistance. I don't know if God, the Spirit, came or the cherubims and seraphims showed up, but I know people showed up, right? If you think about when you pray for some type of assistance, when you're in a pickle, when you need a job, when you need an introduction, when you need certain type of assistance, a spirit didn't descend to do that work. A person showed up to do that work. And so we are indeed Christ's physical presence in the world. Recently, I read an article, and I just loved it. It's by Father Ron Roheiser. And he started with a story. He said there was this little boy, and he was having nightmares. So he went into his mother's room and said, Mom, come and stay with me. And the mother said, oh, you don't need to be afraid. God is there with you. And the little boy said, yes, I know, but can we have a God with skin? Right? This boy needed to be able to touch and feel and hear and see, hopefully not taste, this help. And Ronald Roheiser then said, Jesus made us to be people with senses. This is not by accident that we have the 5 senses, and that we experience the world, we experience our life through these senses. And he understood that our senses need to be able to see and feel him. And so, for example, remember that when Thomas said, "I don't believe unless I see the Lord," well, the Lord appeared and said, "Here I am, and do you want to touch me? Do you want to touch my wounds?" So I think it is very important for us to remember the concreteness of God. He's not a concept, he's not an idea, he's not dogma, he's not just history, but he is very, very present. And most important is that he is present in us. So God's presence with us is through us. And it is the here and now where we are, the body of Christ in action. And it's not just Christ's presence, it's Christ's power. I want to just use a few examples. I was with CRS, and CRS does a lot of incredible work. I'm no longer with CRS now, so if I'm pitching for them, it's really out of the heart. Does a lot of incredible work. So I was thinking of all the work that we were doing, and that was the day where the gospel reading, was about this man who was very sick, and his friends lowered him into Jesus' midst through the roof. They removed part of the roof and they lowered him. And at the end of that miracle, Jesus said, something incredible, or someone said, something incredible has happened today. And I was stuck on that phrase because I thought, we do this work every day. We have little babies who are very malnourished. They're 2 years old and they're 12 pounds, and then we brought them back into health. By the way, at a certain point, you can't do that. But within a certain period, you can do that. We work with people who have HIV/AIDS and how they restore their lives and how they live again. There are many examples of sort of the miraculous sort of turnaround in people's lives. And I was stuck on that phrase, and I said, we do this all the time. Bring life back to people. And then it occurred to me, well, God meant it that way. Yes, I know that's a modern science and so on, but where did modern science come from anyway? It came from the minds of people, and those are the gifts of God who gave it to us just so that we could do his work. So we have to remember that we are empowered by God's power to do these type of work, to really restore life in different forms. Another example I have is that one time I was working with this women's group from Guatemala. We work with a lot of women's groups to empower them, to help them build capacity and take care of their family and so on. This is in a very poor area of Guatemala. And for example, in the village, before there was filtered water, the water they use is sort of like the fifth time around when you are mopping your floor and you clean your mop in this bucket of water, and this is like the fifth time you're doing it. That water is suspended with gray stuff and it has a straws or whatever it is. It's just really gross water. But that's the best way I could explain to you. Before they had filtered water, that's the water they use to clean, to cook, and so on. And so there are a lot of infections. But they learned to filter water. But at the same time, they also learned how to grow crops, particularly cash crops like vegetables and so on, so that they could sell to the market and they have increased income. They also learned about nutrition for their children. So they were able to also grow the type of micronutrients-rich food for their children. In other words, they became these healthy, self-sustaining communities. So we went to visit with them, just a few impressions. One was that to welcome us, their hospitality was that they took a lot of pine needles from pine trees and just covered their entrances with these pine needles, and they were so fragrant. It's the idea hospitality in every culture has its own expression. And for this culture, which has very little, theirs was sort of the aroma of these pine needles that they laid at our feet. The second thing is that, of course, the houses were very simple. There were not a lot of furniture. But in every one of these houses, there was a picture of the Blessed Mother. You know, they always knew the Blessed Mother was looking after them. So I asked them, you know, they had this group in front of me, and wonderful, they were chatty, and they were in their best clothing. And I said, what is the name of this group? They said it in Spanish, and I'm so sorry I can't repeat it, but it translated into intelligent women. And I asked, why did you choose this name? And he said, because we are intelligent. We found out that God gave us this intelligence and that we are capable. We can learn, we could do things, we could take care of our family. We are intelligent and able, and we know that that came from the Lord. Right? That's God in us, among us, and as the body of Christ. So my third point then is God not only gave us himself as the body of Christ among us, he gave us each other. He gave us each other. So when Jesus sent his apostles out to do missionary work, missionary discipleship, he sent them out 2 by 2. We were supposed to do our work together. For one of my essays one time, I started looking at saints who are friends with each other, because I think that we are given each other not as an accident, not just a random accident of time, that we are doing the work with the people who are seated with you, the people who came with you, the people who are in this room, even the people out of this room, that this little short period of time and this narrow space, we have each other. We are the gifts from God. God gave us each other. So I was actually looking at saints who have friends. And by the way, there are a number of married couples also in there. But, you know, starting from the 1st century, remember Felicity and Perpetua? You know, the woman and her servant. We have Francis and Claire. We have John Paul II and Mother Teresa. They were good friends for each other. We have Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross. We have Ignatius of Loyola and Francis Xavier. I could go on and on. But the point that I want to make is that God gave us each other. And that's why C.S. Lewis said, short of the Eucharist, the holiest object that you could engage would be the person next to you. Short of the Eucharist, the most sacred object that you can behold is the person next to you. So sometimes in my prayer, I pray for eyes that help me see that, because I don't think I do a very good job. But that's how special we are to each other. I'm sure you have the same experience too. I live in Notre Dame, I work there. I used to go to the grotto every day. And by the way, when I went to the grotto, I would say, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, today is a work day. We all have to show up for work. Right? But when I'm at the grotto, and sometimes I just stay around, they have some benches, I sit there, I feel like I know the people who are going to the grotto, the people who step up to light a candle, even though I don't know them, but I feel like I know them. It's like sometimes people going up to communion. Don't you have a sense that you know these people? Not in the usual sense of like knowing their name, where they live, what they do, but that you just feel like, I just know these people. They're all here to talk to God. Yeah, somehow they're all here to talk to God. It's either out of joy, something great has happened, and they want the Lord to know it, and they want to thank the Lord, or something sad is happening, something that they're worried about. And of course, for students, they're worried about exams, they're worried about relationships, parents who come, who worry about their children. Sometimes there's illness involved, and so on. But when I sit at the grotto, or when I sit at communion, I just feel like this is family. This is kin. I know these people. Because I think it's the sense that we all have the same God to whom we are talking. and shouting at and thinking and whatever. And I know that experience, and therefore I know these people. And in my morning prayers, the way I do my rosaries, the 5 mysteries, the 5 decades, the first one is always for family and friends, particularly family. The second one is for the people of God who do the work of God, who bring about His kingdom. The third is for illness. The fourth is for myself, who needs a lot of help. And the fifth is for whatever is the issue of the day. And I just want to say, when I start my first decade thinking about family, I always think that my husband and my 2 sons are the gift of God to show me His goodness and His incredible generosity. Yeah, I don't know whether you ever feel that, wow, this is just unbelievable to have these good people whom I don't deserve to be in my life. So remember each other. We are a gift of God. We are meant to, be for each other. I just want to say, and we are holy objects, each of us. Ronald Rolheiser, again, I read him a lot. He one time said, he talked to this woman who is very devout, and he asked him, how does she pray? And she said, well, whenever I can, I do centering prayer, and I can sometimes spend up to 3 hours in the church with the Lord. And he said, great. And he said, well, and how do you feel when you're at dinner table with friends and families? Do you feel the same way? She said, oh, no, not at all. My experience of God really comes from my, 3 hours sitting in the chapel. No, I don't feel that. And immediately he said, well, God is to be experienced in these people also. And in fact, he had a wonderful couple of sentences. He said, by definition, God is ineffable, beyond imagination and beyond language, even the best language of theology and church dogma. So God cannot be described. So God can never be understood or captured adequately in any formula. But God can be known, experienced, tasted, related to in love and in friendship. Right? So this is the second point, that God gives us each other. The third point is, what are we supposed to do with each other? Like, what are we supposed to do with each other? Do I really have only 5 minutes left? Did I really only have 5 minutes left? I could close immediately. The third one was, what are we supposed to do together as this community? I'm going to tell a story of my friend. She was about to retire. She had a very successful life as an investment advisor. She chose 3,000 companies from around the world for investment. So I asked her, I said, Pat, what do you want to do now that you're retiring? And I was the CEO of CRS at that time, and she turned to me with all seriousness. She said, I want to devote my energy to going to heaven. Well, I said, that's a good thing. Support CRS. She said that. So a year later or so, I was in her kitchen. She was hosting me, and she was cutting vegetables. Carolyn, I have figured out something else too. What? It is not enough that I get to go to heaven. We have to make sure everyone gets to heaven. So I don't want to get into the rest of it. Now I have 6 minutes. I don't understand this clock, but anyway, it's counting up rather than counting down. Okay, never mind, can't do arithmetic. So just to go through this, so instead of going through the whole thing, the issue is that I think that we are here to help each other go back to heaven. And the way to do it is that we have to make God real. Is God real in your life? And I have to say, recently I have a major panic, and somebody asked me to do something that requires me to give up everything that I hold on to as security. And I thought, God, you really didn't want this, do you? And I recognize that, yes, God is real to me, but the whole way of surrendering to God is difficult. We tend to give for what we think we can afford rather than what is the core of us. And I think that each other, we make God real. There's so many people who teach me how real God is to them. The Maryknoll sisters who educated me. Not only is God real to them, I went to school 1st to 12th grades with the Maryknoll sisters. At first in 2nd grade or 3rd grade, we just thought that they were strange, and we would ask, like, do they swim in this habit, or is that hair under this, thing, this veil? So we're just curious. But as we grow older, we spent 12 years with them. Probably around when we were 15 and 16, we then thought, why did they leave home? Why did they leave America? America, which has everything, which is the most exciting place on earth to us girls. Why would they leave that? And why would they come and, teach us? They don't even know us. Why did they give up all this? They can't go home. Then one time I concluded God must be very real to them. Because if God is not real, they would be crazy. But this God who is so real to them can, has this power to get them to leave home and everything which is comfortable, everything which is familiar, and they come and they claim that they love us, whom they've never known, but they do really love us. And the God who is real to them is so full of joy. They are so full of joy. Nothing stands in their way. They always feel like an obstacle. It's just a matter of time. And we may not know all the ways that God solves problems, but they really believe in that. I have learned about how God is real by the kindness and the generosity, the mentoring I have received. It came from people. And I've now come to acknowledge that if you try to teach children kindness, you have to make it real for them. They have to see it happen, and more important, they have to have it happen to them. If they have been on the receiving end of generosity, of tenderness, of grace, of mercy, then they believe it and it's real. So we together, the body of Christ, given as gifts, given with intention, is to help each other work our way through salvation. And I know that the church is not just internal, it has to turn out to the world. But before I leave that point, I just want to say the educating of the next generation, the formation of the next generation is so very critical. I work a lot with young people and young Catholics. They don't really understand their faith. They could name the sacraments and they could name a few things in their catechism, but God is not real to them. And I asked a person one time, I said, do you know the God who loves you so much, who is always there and always merciful? He is just there for the asking. If you open your door, God is there. And the person said, I don't think I know that God, but I certainly miss him. So I don't know what we pass on, but I know whatever the work that we do is not adequate. Christian Smith, who is a sociologist that studied youth behavior relative to religion, he coined a phrase that sometimes young people has a sense of God as the divine butler. It's kind of like this generous uncle that you call up when you're in trouble and you need help. And that this God wants them to be a good person and do the right thing. But the whole issue of redemption, the issue of sacrificial love, the issue of grace is sort of like, just lost in some pretty primitive sort of holdings. And I have to say, Christian Smith's work shows that the Catholic Church does not invest in young people's faith formation like other churches, like the Protestant churches. And so our young people look for God in the wrong places. There's a high degree of depression and anxiety. And at the same time, Catholic education, we've lost 25% of Catholic schools in the last 20 years. So to close, I just want to say there are a couple of obstacles standing in the way, and two big ones. One is individualism. I don't like this church. I don't like the homilies. The Mass times are not the most convenient. I don't like their programs. They don't have a program for me. I don't like those people. They are too conservative. They're not conservative enough. I just don't like this. I don't have time for this. Of all the many priorities I have, can't squeeze this in. And this is part of our culture. It's not just in the church. I think the whole book on bowling alone is about this phenomenon. We are less and less disconnected to community. We don't make investment in community. We don't have Bridge Club, for example. We don't invite people to our home. And I think that unless there is community, there cannot be church. So building that community is so important. But the second thing I have to say is fear. I've now really sort of better and better understand fear. Fear doesn't just make us cowardly, but fear makes us try to protect ourselves by closing out the other. All this thing that we're reading about white power and so on is not just a racist issue, it's that the disenchantment that people feel in their lives, the lack of certainty about a better future, cause them to identify some cause, which is usually the other who takes up resources, the other who is undeserving, the other, but it comes from a fear. Just to end this, when I was on a pilgrimage, we were on a boat on the Sea of Galilee. And we were to have Mass on that boat, which is wonderful. And, the boat has two flags pole. One has the Israeli flag, and then so we were hoisting the American flag and pledging the Pledge of Allegiance. And tears came to my eyes, and it was the sense that Israel has gone through a lot. It did go through the whole sort of purging throughout its history as a homeland. Americans, we try to do so much. We stand for what is right. But somehow the outcome of the policies and actions of these two countries just turn out to be so oppressive and so cruel in many ways and so against peace. And it's not that these are not good people or that they have not suffered and that we don't have the right values. But somehow our fears cause us to be the least of ourselves, the lowest of ourselves. It just reduces us to sort of like not even totally human, just these primitive instinct, right? To want to conquer, to want to control, to want to force out, and so on. And no wonder in the Scriptures, so many times God addresses fear. So to really, really end, as Cardinal Tobin said, a bishop never ends, but so don't say now as we bring it together. I just want to say a little quote from a Syrian bishop, Bishop Udo, from Aleppo, and you could imagine the world of Aleppo, and when there was a lot of bombing and so on. He said, when you don't have to die for your faith, live your faith. Thank you very much.
That's good. Thank you so very, very much. Thank you. Be careful. Dr. Woo, thank you so very, very much. Yes, God is real. God is here to help everyone to get to heaven, and we are here to help each other get to heaven. Thank you so very, very much, Doctor. We've been talking about the importance of story. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Magali Rodriguez from St. Joachim Parish, and she will share with us her story. Thank you so very, very much, Magali.
Hello, everyone. My name is Magali Rodriguez, and I wanted to start off by asking everyone a question. Have you ever traveled home, back to your homelands or back to your, to see your parents, and felt like you were out of place? Any raise of hands? Okay, so not many, right? I received the privilege to travel home about 3 years ago. By home, I mean Mexico. Although I was technically home, the only time I felt home was when I visited my grandmothers, who I haven't seen in 22 years. I had 2 living grandmothers at the time, and I was truly blessed to have said my last goodbye to one of them, who passed away this last Friday. My grandfathers sadly passed away 5 and 4 years ago. My family nor I were able to bury our loved ones due to our immigration status. I was able to leave through advance parole, a lot of payments, and a lot of paperwork. You see, it's hard going back to a place where you don't know. Here in America, I'm too Mexican for the Americans. And in Mexico, I was too American for the Mexicans. The only thing that makes me Mexican is my descent and the fact that I was born there. I was brought here when I was 3, and I am not American enough because I don't have a paper to prove it. I have always felt like this was my home, and why shouldn't I? I went to school here. I went to college here, got married here. My children were born here and started a business here. In my life, I was fortunate enough to have met the most important people of my life, who I am eternally grateful for. Sister Linda from Holy Name, she passed away some time ago, and Camden, who at the age of 3, welcomed me and my parents with open arms. To her and to Catholic Charities, my family and I received our first Christmas presents and food here in the United States. Yes, I was grateful for that Navy logo Holy Name sweats and my Barbies that I got. She taught me how to pray the rosary, and later in life, I actually taught my mother how to pray the rosary. Later, Father Ken Hallahan, who I have known since I was small, he may not remember me, although he doesn't remember much these days either. But his love and kindness towards my family taught me to see through the eyes of Christ. He has welcomed my family in his life like if he was, a father. Father Joel from Divine Mercy, Violin, who became a second father to me, helped me guide me and straighten my faith when I was recovering from an abusive relationship from my husband's father. And later on in life, married me to the love of my life, who I can say we are officially 6 years, together. Monsignor Bob, who recently passed, who encouraged me to have a voice and stand up towards injustice whenever it's needed. And lastly, Father Peter Shamaki, for giving me an unexperienced young lady a chance and always defending me and trusting me. You see, I am considered a dreamer, because I was brought here illegally when I was small. However, I am a dreamer because I carry the dreams of my parents, the dreams of a better life, the dreams of a future for my children, and overall, I carry the dreams of all the religious priests and religious sisters that have filled my heart with love and compassion towards my brothers and sisters in Christ. And I wanted to say to all the priests and religious sisters here, please know that just a random act of kindness affects our lives. So, when people ask me, what does being Catholic and a young Catholic woman mean to me? It means completely everything. Thank you.
Magali, thank you so very, very much. We're going to shift our attention now to this side of the stage. I'm going to reintroduce Josh Miller, who is going to be facilitating our panelists. I'd like to introduce our panelists, if I may. Estrelita Martinez from Divine Mercy Parish. Estrelita, are you here? Could you come up on this side, please? Thank you. Vincent Mancuso. How are you? Good to see you. Josh. And finally, Mr. Kevin Hickey, Executive Director, Catholic Charities, Diocese of Camden, and one of the kindest people I've ever known.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Josh, it's all yours, sir.
Okay? All right.
There goes Josh.
Two people have told me that they remind me of the old Phil Donahue show, so now I can really incarnate that with a microphone, right? So when Dr. Woo was sharing, there was a moment when there was a stillness that came over the audience here, and that was the quote from C.S. Lewis. I mean, a number of things she said was brilliant, but that after the Eucharist, the holiest person next to ourselves is a person. The holiest person that we can behold is the person next to us. So I guess very briefly for each of you, I'd like you to share, how is it in your work with CRS that you behold Christ in the people that you serve? And also, not just behold Christ, but be Christ to them in very, very incarnate ways. So share more of your story and how you're doing that in practice.
Who goes first?
I'm very involved with the young people. And throughout my time here today, we're talking about missionary discipleship. And when I think of missionary discipleship, I think of young people. We are a people of mission. We are a people of initiative. We're a people of change. And I encourage all of you to look at young people and see that not only are we the future, but we are the today. And we want to see that change, and we want to see it through. And we're gonna do everything that it takes to see that happen. And when you look at young people, they are just so vibrant. And once they encounter Christ, it's like nothing can stop them. So yeah, yeah.
So I work at Catholic Charities in Camden, and I teach English to immigrants and refugees there. And so seeing Christ in the other, in my students, is easy in our work. The Holy Family, of course, were refugees themselves when they were waiting for Jesus to be born. And we have the opportunity to see people who need to be treated the way Jesus asked us to treat our brothers and sisters. We see people who need clothes, people who need water, people who need to be taught how to adjust their lives in America. People need to be welcomed into a new, scary foreign land for them. So in that sense, as you meet people, as I meet my students and get to know new immigrants and refugees, you see right away, they're needy people, they traveled like the Holy Family, and it's really a privilege to get to know some of these people, because of course Jesus calls us to find the needy and take care of the needy. And as you meet these people and encounter them, when you expose yourself to them, you suddenly see there's more need than you even knew of, and you find new ways to give of yourself, and new ways to see Christ in them, and new ways to minister to them.
Beautiful. Josh, I'm lucky working at Catholic Charities because I get to encounter people like Starr and Vincent, and so I'm sitting, as C.S. Lewis said, next to holy people who said yes, and I know neither one of these people think of themselves as remarkable, but Starr has been down to the border in McAllen, Texas. Vincent, you just heard, said yes, I'll contribute my talents. By the way, I recently discovered he has a PhD, so he's probably the most highly educated ESL teacher the refugees have ever encountered, so thank you. So, and I guess my message to all of us here is, just like Vincent and Starr don't think of themselves as remarkable, but they said yes, which seems like a simple thing, but maybe there was a little bit of difficulty in saying yes. But lots of good things happen because they said yes.
The difficulty of saying yes. So I found myself in a position in my life where I was a stay-at-home dad, and our two youngest children were starting school full-time, so I had a little time during the day. And my wife and I talked about it, and we decided that it'd be great if our family could contribute to the community in a really profound way. And so we decided that I would try to go to Catholic Charities and just open myself up to find what God might have in store for us, how he would need us. And Dr. Woo also mentioned one obstacle sometimes is fear. And so my background was in genetics and microbiology, not exactly teaching English, not exactly social work. That's what I was comfortable with. But, and I was a little scared, we were a little scared for my family, what it would mean or what I could do. I didn't really have a plan. We prayed about it and we told God, I'm going to go to Catholic Charities. I know it's an organization. I know they're serving the people of Camden and Camden County. And so I walked in the door and said, I'd like to volunteer. What do you have? And they told me, well, our refugee and immigration program takes volunteers. And I said, if that's where God wants me, that's fine. And then I got to that program and they said, our English class takes volunteers. And I said, if that's where God's leading me, that's where I'll go. And I've been there for a little over a year now, and it's been a great blessing to me. God gave me this great gift once I opened up and said, I might be a little afraid, but I'm gonna put myself out there, see where he brings me, and I've had this amazing privilege to work with immigrants and refugees like I have.
One of the common themes that you've all shared is that in your service, you have received so much. Share a moment about how you have received as you've poured yourselves out in service to others.
During my time at the border, when I went last year, we did a lot of, obviously feeding, the refugees who have been coming, playing with the children, but not only all those things, but you get to talk to these refugees and you get to hear their story and you get to hear everything that they've encountered through their long journey. And you think to yourself, who am I to be sitting on this side? Me. Who am I, me, to be listening to this incredible story? God, why did you put me here and why are they there? And I still have yet to find the answer, but I know that God has a purpose, not only for myself, but for them, because they can teach us so much. We can learn so much from them. They are such beautiful people, are people of passion, are people of faith, And despite all of the trials and tribulations that they have gone through, they still remain faithful, not only to, their families, but to God, because they believe that this is their plan for them. So, yeah, I've learned a lot of faith from those people and through everyone I've encountered, during my faith journey.
So I feel like I've received this great blessing of having the opportunity to serve people. I hadn't had a lot of personal exposure to immigrants and refugees before I began volunteering in Catholic Charities. But when you meet people, as Star was saying, often they're the most generous people. They are often trying to bring me gifts that I don't really want, but I appreciate the gesture so much. They're often trying to help out me and my children with things. It's given us the gift of a broader perspective and a real blessing to serve. My children, over the summer when they're not in school, they come with me and they help me teach English. Sometimes they sit in the corner and play. Sometimes they interact with some of my students. It's good for our students to talk to children too, I guess, as they're learning English. And them being there, they're interested in learning Arabic phrases now, my children. They're interested in learning Creole phrases and some Spanish. And when they see people, this is a huge gift that I feel like service has given our family. When they see people who are different or speak a totally different language they've been exposed to, they still see them as people and friends and someone they can work with. They may not speak the same language or understand them, but they can make some connections with these people. And so it's been a huge gift for me and my wife as a family, and for my children as a family, to have this broader perspective and more opportunity to meet new people.
We do have a few questions from the audience, so I'd like to proceed with those.
Absolutely. Can you tell us what are some of the initial steps that we can take to reverse the problem of hate and prejudice in our world?
Sure. Well, to me, it's, again, somewhat simple in that it's encountering and coming to know people who are different than me, which is, in part, is why these border trips are important. And by the way, there's information at the Catholic Charities desk out in the hallway. If you'd like to go, we have 6 planned between now and October. So I'd encourage you, if your parishes are interested. It's a marvelous opportunity. I'm sure Star would be happy to talk about it. But this opportunity to encounter the other is, for me, that's what breaks down the barrier that I put up. And Dr. Woo was talking about it at the end of her speech. It's usually when we're fearful. And that is somewhat human nature, right? That's somewhat God-given, that protects us from harm. But so we have to work sort of against ourselves to overcome that fear. But I think the more opportunities you have, and again, at the desk out there, we've got opportunities in prison ministry. We're going to have on May 4th a symposium on addictions. So there's all kinds of ways that people can encounter the other, which breaks down that fear.
Dr. Woo put it great, is that we have to see each other as holy. And when we think about it that way, we have to think that every person that we are encountering Jesus. If we hate the other person across from us, we hate Jesus. But don't we love Jesus? I mean, it's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that, so start.
Can I add to that one too? You mind? So this is a bit of a personal story about this topic. Of course the answer is to reduce hate and fear, is to encounter, right? To meet people different from you and see them fully as humans and see Christ in them when you meet them. So I started working at Catholic Charities, an English program, in January of 2018. And at that time, we had a lot of Syrian refugees who were in the classroom a lot. And I got to meet a lot of them. And they spoke a lot of Arabic and a little English, and I spoke a lot of English and a tiny bit of Arabic. But I got to know the community, and they're very generous people, very warm people. Anyway, by about the 3rd month or so, I hopped in the car and turned on the radio, and the radio was set to NPR. We listened to it before, and it was a news story. And so on the radio, when they interview someone who speaks a different language, they'll let them talk in their language first, and then the translator's voice comes over to translate. And I turned the radio on, and Arabic was coming out of the radio, and I felt this warm feeling overcome me. I didn't understand exactly what they were saying, but I recognized the accent, and I recognized some words, and I said, oh, there's Arabic on the radio, great. And then the translator came in, it was a story about the tragedy of the Syrian civil war. But for me, had I not had that experience 3 or 4 months earlier, whenever I would hear Arabic, because of the media culture I grew up in, it was usually terrible news, it was something scary that was probably being communicated to me because of the media environment we were in. And because of my experience hearing so much Arabic, having so many friends, I personally, when I heard that language now, it wasn't scary at all. It was comforting. I felt like I was home hearing this on the radio.
It's nice.
So having that experience gave you a whole new way of seeing not just the particular people, but a way of seeing others that might be other examples.
I hear an Arabic speaker on the radio or TV, I feel warmth and connection, and I would like to know them. I would like to try to teach them some English.
Let's go to another question.
So we have a question specifically for Star. How do you bring Jesus to the youth when the family doesn't go to church?
So you have to be that family. You have to be that family to those young people. The people want, young people want relationship, ultimately. Yeah, as young people, we want to have friends, you know, we want to hang out. And it's through that relationship with the young people is when they get to encounter Christ through you. It's not about preaching Jesus down their throat right away. It's about relationship, community, and through testimony. You get to tell your story to each other, and through that story, you encounter Jesus. That's it.
She's good. One of the constant themes that we've heard is that it's people over programs, and over and over again, we keep hearing that. There's a simplicity and a depth and a beauty to that. People over programs and those relationships. Tom, you had 4 or 5 fingers held up. Is there another question?
There is one. How do we encourage young people to volunteer when they don't think they're getting anything tangible out of it?
Am I young enough to answer this one?
Just all you.
I don't know that tangible gifts for volunteers are what's going to do the trick. It's fun, I guess, to volunteer and get a t-shirt. When you volunteer, I've gotten a t-shirt for volunteering Catholic Charities. The coffee is free. I get coffee for volunteering Catholic Charities. Yeah. But that's not why I come back. The coffee's not that good. The t-shirt's not that
good. Vincent.
They're fine. They're fine. They're very nice. No, I think what I'm trying to get at is Christianity, the love of Jesus works the same way it always has, right? People encounter, people meet someone in need and fulfill a need. People make friends, and that's what keeps them coming back. So I think the answer to that is we need to, when we have volunteers come to try something new, it might be nice to give them a gift, but it's also nice to make sure they can see they can have work done, impact right away. I ever see new volunteers who are teachers for ESL, and right away I try to introduce them, make them comfortable, let them see a student they can make some progress with on some level the first day, because that's what's going to bring them back. It's when they see Christ in someone else, then they will come back. When they see themselves having the opportunity to be Christ to someone else, then they will come back as a volunteer. So I would recommend focusing on giving them that encounter right away.
I'd certainly second what Vincent said. I think, well, if you just look at these two fine people next to me, and I feel this way about Catholic Charities, some remarkable people there, and I think young people, they have a very, very high BS detector, and when they spot people that they know are real, they want to be around them. And so that's a challenge to all of us in this room. You've got to be real, and you can't have artifice, and you can't, be full of it, as one might say. And I think that's what draws people. Is that tangible quality that is a gift of sorts, but a different kind of gift.
And for that realness, if I can talk, I'm maybe the second most qualified to talk about young people on this panel.
That's right.
I'm not sure if I'm listening for young people people. I'll try to speak for young people. I feel like, Kevin talked about people being real. What credit for people, younger people like me, like us maybe, credibility comes from the work you do. That's where the credibility is. The credibility isn't in the titles, and the credibility isn't necessarily in the gifts or the attention you have. The credibility comes from the work people see you do. When volunteers come and encounter a new ministry, if they see you doing work, that will be the credibility. That's the realness we're looking for. That will draw us in.
And they also want to see the change. Are you actually making change? If you're not making change, why are we going to be a part of something that's not being effective or not initiating anything? So we want to see the change. We want to see the results.
So how might you all show change to people who are on the cusp of getting involved? They may be fearful. They maybe think that they should get something back right away. How do you show them that change in a way that's so inviting and inspires them to be a part of what you're doing? That wasn't a hard question, was it?
I'm thinking of, how many hours we spend, chewing this over, Josh. And I think I go back to trying to signal to people that if they join in, and it doesn't just have to be Catholic Charities, whatever they're joining in, that they are a part of it. Vincent mentioned how he welcomed other volunteers. And I reflected, we need to do a better job of that across the 6 counties. By the way, I hasten to add, Josh said Camden County. Catholic Charities, of course, is in all 6 counties of the diocese. Just want to make that clear. But to make them know that they're welcomed, we hear that a lot about our churches. So it's something we have to be conscious of about welcoming people, and not in a forced kind of way, but in a genuine manner. I think that will pull people in as well. But it's a tough subject because you're dealing with all kinds of people that you're trying to attract, or at least give an opportunity to serve, to work out their salvation.
So as far as affecting change, I think, as we were saying, giving them something to do, someone to encounter right away is very important. So advice for new volunteers, when we have new volunteers for the Catholic Center, I try to give them, at the Catholic Center English class, I try to give them something concrete they can do initially. For example, this client of ours learning English wants to be an Uber driver. New volunteer, can you help him set up his Uber app? That's something the volunteer can do. And at the end of the day, reiterate the volunteer, you did this today for them. That wouldn't happen if it wasn't for you. Thank you. Because that's the real thing that's going to keep people in the fringes who put their toe in. They're going to come back. They're going to say, I helped Muhammad get his first Uber app set up when he first came to America, which is a tremendous gift to do for someone.
I also think that not only when you are volunteering in whatever organization that you're in, you're being part of the change, but when you come home from that experience, you have to carry that out throughout your daily life. You can't just leave that behind when you come back, because then what justice did you do for all of those people that you served? You're supposed to be initiating the change when you come back. It starts at home, and it starts in our parishes, it starts with our people, and it starts with just one person. So if you can be that one person to initiate that change back at home, then that's where the ripple effect happens, and that's where the domino effect happens.
So being Christ and serving him in a constant way, not just somewhere that we think is a mission field, but we are mission, is another phrase that we've heard, which should be everywhere. There's another question from the audience.
Alrighty, we have a tricky question for the panel. How do you make going to Mass more appealing to young people?
I'm glad they're answering that one.
So throughout my experience with the ministry that I'm in right now, we have to be able to relay Jesus' message in a real world today way. I don't know if that even makes sense, but we have to relate it to our daily life. as young people, we want to know that Jesus' teachings and everything that he preached can relate to our life. As young people, we go through so many things, and you know, everyone goes through difficulties throughout our life. But we want to be able to make that connection. And so it's just, you know, maybe throughout the homilies, instead of it just being so, no offense, monotone, just make it more real world, make it more, you know, relatable. And I don't know.
And thank God we've had that this week, haven't we? The preaching has been so dynamic and so relatable. It's been wonderful.
So can I talk about slightly older Catholics? My wife and I, we have 3 children. A young family, we'll say. My wife and I have 3 children, currently 9, 6, and 5 years old. So there's a point in our lives when we had 3 kids under 4. And I was a stay-at-home dad. I was with the kids a lot. And my wife and I, we go out with the kids. We'd keep, you know, the kids with us all the time. We're going out. And, you know, for better or for worse, when you're a young family situation, you're constantly asking yourself, are we the loudest family in this room right now? Are my kids the most annoying kids in this room right now? And unfortunately, for better or for worse, that carries over into Mass, right? And so our church, Our Lady of Hope in Blackwood, has a children's liturgy. And even though our children were too young, this is a great program. It's during the Mass. I think we have it on two Masses on Sundays. We go to the 10:30 Mass. During Mass, for the Liturgy of the Word, they ask all the children to come and stand up and leave the main church and go to the chapel in the back for a lesson that's more tailored to them. It's the gospel story again, but it's taught on their level. And it does a couple of things. It acknowledges that children are people we care about as part of our parish community. And because it teaches them the gospel in a way they can understand. Then the children come back for the Liturgy of the Eucharist. So it treats the children respectfully and also sends a signal to the parents that there are other children here, this is the Mass where you're going to fit in, and you're probably not going to be the loudest family here. And if you are, no one else minds. So it's a step the church takes to show young families this is a welcoming place for you. This Mass is a place where we are going to honor your children, and we're going to work with you, which does a lot for us.
I got an idea. Okay, so it just came to me. I got it. I was thinking about Star and all the people. It's about 70 people now from this diocese who've gone down to the border. And one of the things they're told is, look, you're not necessarily going there to serve, you're going there to accompany. But of course, we're Americans, and so we want to serve, we want to do something. But it's part of the daily reflection down there. You are there to learn and to walk with people and not necessarily do for them. Okay. But we have to work at that, and that's a daily conversation that people are having on these journeys. So now I'm going to go to Mass, and Dr. Woo talked about people complaining the Mass isn't meaningful, the Mass is, I don't like the time it is. I'm wondering, the priest will love to hear this from me, I'm wondering if, is it conceivable that either before Mass or even during the Mass, I always like Bishop when he says Mass, he often, like in prisons, he's offering at times a commentary on the Mass as he goes along, which is a wonderful thing. And I don't know if, and that's prison, and that's, many of the people attending are not Catholic, but I'm wondering if that would be helpful to people, because I will say, Star, that young people are, impatient, and they want it now, and they're on their phones and all that kind of stuff. So I guess there's got to be a way of counteracting that. So that's just one thought I have for priests.
Very good dialogue, wonderful. So with one more question, it looks like.
Last question. And Mr. Hickey, this is from the audience. Thank you for doing a great job at Catholic Charities. You have a great heart to feel people's trouble and pain. Catholic Charities is wonderful. What is an easy way to join a Catholic charity ministry?
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you.
Kevin asked that question, really.
Yeah, I have no shame. That is a great question. Thank you for whoever asked that. And thank you for the compliment, the gracious comments on Catholic Charities. Wonderful people. I would say go out to the table. It's out there. There's a number of resources, but I just want to say, our job here, I told Sylvia Lumeau and Maria Rodriguez, who are staffing the desk, now look, if people come up to you, don't say, here's the program. Let's engage, let's find out, because we know you're working on plans. Let us help, let us walk with you as you figure it out. We won't force, our job is not to force it down your throat, but to try to come up with things that are amenable to you. We obviously have some slots, prison ministry. There's Sister Mary Cronin is wonderful. She's doing a workshop today. I mentioned the addictions healing workshop on May 4th. We've got, Vincent's talked about ESL. We've got the border experience, but there's all kinds of things we can do. So please stop at the desk. You're more than welcome and you'll enjoy talking to them too.
All right, give us a 10-second exhortation, each one of you, about what we can do next to be Christ for one another and be ourselves Christ.
If in your heart you have, you feel passionate about something, just do it. Don't be scared. Don't have anxiety over it. Just do it. That's God talking to you and telling you to just carry out whatever passion you have. And do it for Jesus, do it for God, and do it wholeheartedly, and you'll see it come into fruition throughout the rest of your life and for the years to come and generations to come.
I would say go encounter, go show up and do some work. If you feel like you're not qualified to be Christ to someone, if you found someone needy and went out to help them, you would find there is a need for you to do that, and you would see it happening to you. Just get out there, sign up to volunteer with Catholic Charities, visit the border, do the work, meet people, encounter people, and you'll be surprised with how much love you're capable of and how many blessings you'll receive in return.
I'll say what I say to newly arrived staff at Catholic Charities. Just raise your hand. So, yeah, I'll do it. Or even if you don't know what's about it, just do it. Just raise your hand. Yeah, and all kinds of things happen.
So join me in thanking our wonderful panelists, Star, Vincent, and Kevin.